And of course, it's like, you know, that's fun.
Sure.
You
You can't wear the same one. It's a thing. I'm going to start the recording.
Okay, you ready? Members, are we ready? Carl, do we have a representative from the city?
Ms. Bevis Carver's on Teams, is my understanding.
Yes.
Oh, good, good. Okay, good. At 6 o'clock, I'd like to call to order the 919th meeting of the Board of Directors of Alexandria Sanitation Authority, now known as AlexRenew. Members of the board, if you take a look at the agenda, do I have an approval of the agenda? So moved. For second? Second. All in favor?
Hi.
Aye.
Hi.
Madam Secretary, do we have any members of the public? The heat must be keeping them away. Okay. Let's jump right into the consent agenda. We have minutes for two meetings, the 18th and again on the 21st. Give you a moment to review those. Motion to approve the minutes of those two meetings. So moved. Motion by Mr. Beal. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Caldarelli. All in favor?
Hi.
Okay, let's jump right into community meetings. I am sure every community meeting in the last month has been about the election, so no sanitary authority business at those meetings, I know. Any reports from finance or governance? Other than the budget. Okay. Remind everybody, board elections are coming up in July. Have to come up with a slate of candidates. And a board retreat. Mr. Carl, do you want to say anything about the board retreat, other than it's in February?
Yeah, February 7th and 8th, we talked a little bit about the retreat last meeting. We were working on some prep materials for the board retreat. Again, it's going to be focused on looking at a rate design. So we are going to be putting some materials for the board, most likely in September, as some prep work and homework like we did last year.
Great. Let's jump right into unfinished business and update on LEAP.
So last meeting, the board had asked how we'd be presenting enrollment and usage of LEAP. So what we wanted to do is we put together a draft dashboard. This is just overall, it's a draft really to show how we wanted to present the data on a monthly basis as we start moving forward with LEAP. So in the first slide of the dashboard on the left, we're showing a map of all the census tracts in Alexandria. And what we were able to find from the census data was households enrolled in SNAP.
Yep.
And what we did is we took a ratio of the households. Back with Florida. What we did is we took a ratio of the total households in each census area to the households enrolled in SNAP to try and come up with another way to look at, where we might potentially be seeing LEAP utilized in low-income areas in Alexandria. It's an update to what we presented back in September of last year that we also included in your green folder, where we had the EPA, the former version of the EPA FCI. They've changed it since then. So we've included that just as a comparison to the SNAP map. We like the idea of using SNAP opposed to the EPA FCI because as we mentioned back since September, they changed the way this is calculated. It's no longer using the 20th percentile income. It's now just using median household income. So we thought SNAP would be a better way to go when we put our dashboard together. In addition to this, we're showing the amount expended to date in the top right, how many customers we assisted, and then we're also tracking service disconnections for non-payment, all of which we can then have show up on the map to the left with different icons. They will be showing up as we move forward. Again, we don't have any enrollments or any disconnections to date, so we're holding off on showing that data until we get some customers enrolled in the program or we start. The second slide of the LEAP dashboard is those same census tracts that we showed in the map. We wanted to show how many service disconnections there were within each of those census tracts, as well as how many customers we've assisted with LEAP. And then we also showed the SNAP ratio with a line from highest. The way the graph's organized is on the x-axis, it's the highest percentage to the lowest percentage to see if there's any trends there that we can pick up on as we implement the program.
Now, the bars in this graph are
They're fake.
fake, right? Yeah,
All of this is fake.
except the purple line, right?
The purple line is correct.
Yeah.
That's actual census data. And then the last slide to compare back to what we showed in September, this is the median household income comparison in your green folder. We wanted to show where the current delinquencies are overlaid with the SNAP data. So you can see residential in the triangle, commercial in the circles. The darker purple has a higher percentage for households receiving SNAP, and the lighter colors have the lower percentage. And then when you look at it, Alexandria as a whole in each of the census tracts is lower than US average of 12%. Some areas are higher than the Virginia average of 3%. And if you look at Alexandria overall, every census tract is the SNAP ratio of 2.2%. Utilizing SNAP. And when you look at the numbers around that, we totaled it, and it's around 3,500 households. That could be renters or utilizing SNAP. And that correlated very well to what we presented last year to the board with respect to the EPA data, the financial capability index. That was the slide we presented back. Just for comparison, so you all have it. Let's pause for a moment. I'll make sure Ms. Hammer has any questions. You can jump in.
No questions right now. Thank you. Can you all hear me?
You had some questions about coordination with the city, right? On this program?
Specifically with the housing authorities,
Right.
because it's most renters aren't paying us directly. So the correlation between census districts and delinquencies is not high, except looking where our units are in the city. There are some of our units, I'm not sure how many of them, where their residents may be our customers. So, and so I think a disconnection probably should be coordinated, or at least give our staff give them a heads up that this is coming.
We have a meeting with the city's housing director on Thursday to kind of go through with more data requests. In addition, we'll look at our hot data as well.
Ms. Hammer just texted me. She said she doesn't have any questions.
Right, good.
So again, the dashboard to draft, looking for feedback. If there's anything else we'd like to see in the dashboard, let us know. We're happy to make changes. Maybe just a quick update from Mr. Robertson on our initial rollout of LEAP for over the last month. Maybe give the board an update on how many customers we're taking in, things like that.
Yeah, so we've started promoting it in bill inserts and email pretty frequently. And we've had some response from the customers, but not what we originally hoped for. I think we have 7 that reached out to be put on a list. In one of the initial emails before we launched, we reached out to them. We haven't heard back from most of them. I don't think anybody's actually followed through and completed an application at this point. We are sending out more emails and inserts this month. So hopefully that drives up some of the traffic to our partners. I did check the stats before this before this meeting on an email that we sent yesterday, and it did get quite a few clicks to LEAP. So hopefully that generates some leads too. Definitely not as quick as we had hoped for. I'm not terribly surprised. I think it'll ramp up as we start disconnecting folks.
And any prospect of disconnects are still months away, right?
Yeah, not until July. So they've received the second notice is going out now to most of the customers that are past due. It's a certified letter that's going to their house. And then, we're emailing, calling. Also leading up to disconnections, Promise, who is our payment plan provider, is going to have a campaign around texting all of our customers to sign up for payment plans. So we'll have that going as well. So they'll really be getting text, email, phone call, and letters directly to their house.
So we probably won't see any data on the dashboard until the fall, probably.
Yeah, we might be limited in how many people we can disconnect just based off of the new General Assembly's law anyways. If it's anywhere near 92 degrees, we cannot disconnect. So that doesn't look great for July through, the beginning of September.
Yeah. Any other questions on LEAP?
We do have one other update. We mentioned 2 meetings ago that we would be meeting with some of the other authorities in Virginia. So we met with Western Virginia Water Authority as well as Prince William Water to learn about how they're implementing similar programs. I'll start and let Ms. Waters kind of fill in some of the details, but one of the biggest things we took away from our meeting so far with the other authorities is they're not seeing full utilization of their funds. They're using about half of it year over year. And one of the other key areas that we found is these groups don't have a income requirement. They're not verifying income, meaning there's not, right now we're setting our program at 150% below federal poverty level. They do not have that income requirement. Anybody who needs help can sign up. So we had mentioned previously to the board, that's kind of a direction we'd like to move after we saw how many people would enroll in the program initially. So it's helpful information to have as we start to mature as a program.
All this, I think, portends a very slow growth curve, right? I think that's what's going to happen.
You want to talk a little bit about?
Yeah,
VGA?
well, Prince William, who we met with yesterday, we asked about the participation rate, and because we've seen this time and time again, even well-run programs, and they said that they try to streamline this as much as possible. Not having the income eligibility requirement certainly helps. They only have anecdotal information to support what they think the reason is that people aren't participating, but they think some of it is the multi-unit households that they're not reaching, that they've got payment plans and other options, and that Alan Farr said pride. A lot of people just don't want to ask for help on their bills. And so they have $150,000 a year, and they're using about half, 75,000. So that was, and what is their This is their customer base. It's quite a bit larger than ours. Yeah. So I don't know, the lessons learned, I think, from the ones we've talked to is making it as easy as possible is key. Getting the word out, and we just have to manage our expectations that we may not have stellar participation.
You say they have 150,000. What's the source of that 150,000?
They talked about donations, but there's no way they're getting $150,000 with donations. And
Partner with Serve as well in Northern Virginia. They get money through Serve.
they're also, I'm sure, using non-rate revenue sources. They just didn't get into what those sources are.
The overall point of the two calls was as well to talk about potential legislation to use rate revenue to fund a cap. That was part of the whole reason to call these two entities. They're two of the larger entities in Virginia. Neither entity had interest in pursuing legislation for using rate revenue to fund a cap. So if that's something the board, wants us to continue to move forward down that path, it looks like the options we have are starting to look like as the carve out language like we talked about previously, like they did in Richmond and Alta Vista, that was in Ms. Waters' memo to carve out language specifically for Alexandria, because I think politically for both authorities that we talked to, they saw it as a potential political issue with their boards as well as, with their customer base.
Just keep going ahead with LEAP and get through July and August and see what happens. Yeah. We're well positioned, but it's going to take time.
We should in the next month have around $75,000 in our program.
Significant.
The bill went out today. So we're moving in the right direction to fund LEAP. It's just,
That's a big plus up in a month, by the way.
yeah, we mentioned that we'd had other non-rate revenue sources. The billing services agreement with the city is one of those sources.
Significant. Any other questions about LEAP? Talk about green bonds. Carl?
Sure, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Van.
So on June 5th, just 2 weeks ago, AlexRenew sold green bonds, and these green bonds will be funding our upcoming capital projects to upgrade our preliminary and primary systems, our tertiary systems, and our solid systems. And we're joined tonight by Ms. Fry, who is our financial advisor with PFM, who's going to walk through more details on the green bond sale, which is up on the slide. So
thank you. Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board. I'm happy to report on a very successful bond sale that we had. As Caitlin mentioned, we just priced the bonds just 2 weeks ago, and we're set up to close on the bonds a week from today and have those funds in hand. The financing was just over $50 million. We'll talk through the more specific numbers here shortly, but $50 million of green bonds. The interest rate a 4.17. When we met back in December, we estimated a 4.15. So a little bit lucky that it came in that close to what we originally estimated. These bonds will be repaid over 30 years. So if you compare that to, if you were going to go to a 30-year fixed rate mortgage, that's around 7.5% today. 4.17 looks good. It's below the planning rate that we use when we're planning for debt issuances in your financial model. When we embarked upon this financing, we talked back in December about other financing options. As you know, in the past, you've relied on the Clean Water Revolving Loan Fund, which doesn't have enough funding to fund projects throughout the state at the moment. You've used the WIFIA program, which based on current market conditions is actually a higher interest rate than you could get in the capital markets. We talked about that in December. We updated that and confirmed that remains true. And the other option we talked about was the Virginia Resources Authority pooled financing. And so All of those options were in fact, from our best estimates, more costly than what we ended up with. Through the bond pricing process, we were very successful. We had about a week of marketing the bonds through the official statement, which is this very long and detailed document. Staff put together very well, answered a lot of investor questions. And then we had roughly a day and a half of talking to investors about the specific prices on your bonds. And so we started that process. That was Tuesday morning, and we were talking to investors about the yields and prices on the bonds, and we were at an interest rate of a 4.27. We had very strong demand from investors for your bonds. They were very excited to see a new credit come to market, so a credit that could diversify their portfolio. Very happy with the AAA credit rating. A lot of strong interest for water and sewer bonds in general. And so we had a lot of good demand. And so we were able to tighten up, lower the yields on your bonds through that day and a half. And so where we ended was that 4.17 interest rate, which compared to where we started Tuesday, it saved $1 million in debt service over the life of the bonds. You go to the next slide. So the amount of bonds that we sold, the goal was to fund $50 million in capital projects. That's the estimated funds to be spent over 3 years. And then we also needed to pay all the costs of issuing the bonds. The par amount, the stated par amount or principal amount that you see on the cover of the official statement is $45.68 million. And the difference in that is what's called a net premium. That's really a function of the current market. So investors prefer to pay a little bit higher price for the bonds. It protects the value of their bonds over time, really just a market-based decision in how the bonds are priced. So $45.6 million in par to get you the $50 million in funding. And then, as I said, we're set up to close next week, and the $50 million and all the costs will be transferred in and invested over time as those funds are spent down. So happy to answer any questions. By all accounts, a very successful sale, very attractive, a lot of diverse and strong interest in your bonds.
Could you flip back to the previous slide? Let me ask a question to Ms. Fian and others. You know, the interest rate is one measure of the sort of expense of financing. But there's also the internal effort of putting a bond issue together versus going to VRA or going to WIFIA. If you're to look at the total sort of overhead cost of financing, is issuing our own bonds more efficient or less efficient than if we went through some of these other facilities like WIFIA or VRA?
I personally think, having gone through working with WIFIA loans and Virginia Clean Water revolving loans, that there is a different, we'll see on the other side the administrative burden of using these bond proceeds, but I think there is a more significant administrative burden throughout the life of the project than that we've seen from just the amount of documentation associated with those types of programs. So there has been significant work going into getting to this stage of a bond sale. I think coming out of it, I don't think it's going to see. It's not going to be our first time through.
Yeah.
It's not going to be as much of a straight burden.
State the official statement had to come from scratch this time and updated it.
I think it was beneficial for us to go through it. To provide a new way to get money.
I would say that WIFIA carried more, there was more work for WIFIA for us to go through the WIFIA loan back in 2019, 2020, given all the environmental documentation and all the project report stuff we had to put together up front for WIFIA. So I would say the burden for WIFIA I felt was higher than it was for the green bond sale this year. I think on the back end, you know, WIFIA and and the Clean Water Revolving Loan Fund funds are going to carry Build America, Buy America requirements that are more stringent than what we're currently doing with American Iron and Steel. I think it's hard for us as wastewater entities to even comply with some of those criteria. We talked about this back in December. 55% of your product has to be made in the United States. And when you're talking about specialized centrifuges and equipment at the plant, it's really hard for that manufacturer to meet it. So we would be writing a lot of exemptions for BABA for the specific work we're doing here at the plant. And the administrative side for just AlexRenew with AIS and Davis-Bacon was something new for the contractor on AlexRenew. So going through the BABA piece, would have been even probably more work, one, on us administratively to help stand up a program for them to track it, and two, for them to meet it or write exemption letters.
So boiling it all down, recognizing the first time is always more labor intense because you're learning how to do it. But going forward, this is a more efficient financing vehicle. Is that kind of what you're saying?
I think so at this point, based on where the market is.
That's the key, where the market is right now. That could change. It may not. Hopefully it won't, and we can stick with this method. But if it does, then we'd have to assess, putting up with the extra, VRA is probably a more likely conduit for, other than issuing directly than with you. It's really going to be what's the interest rate differential, and is it worth headaches with them?
I would add in to say the benefit. Yes, we spend, like Ms. Fian said, we spend a lot of time on it, but the benefits definitely outweighs the cost. Now we've added this arsenal of like financing option to a small organization like AlexRenew, in addition to others that we other tools that we do have. And we would see, just like how Mr. Jinks and Mr. Fian said, depending on the market, how it goes, we could bounce off one option.
I don't think we're going to see 1 3/8 interest rate.
No, not anytime soon. Not anytime soon. We said that before COVID, too, and COVID happened.
Good.
Question, the green bond aspect of it, did that help generate additional demand?
It was not as clear of a strong demand as we've seen in other bond deals, quite honestly. And in part, it could be because we happened to be pricing in the busiest market week in 2 years. So we were lucky that we had good pricing and good interest in a very busy time. So it's a little harder for investors to make that extra step and say we're buying because of the green bond. So I can't measure and say that yes, it saved or these investors came in because of it.
The tax exempt municipal bond funds, when they show portfolios list which a category green bonds are labeled. So is it a marketing tool for mutual funds?
It is, and it's hard because they all have their own criteria for how they market it and what they consider green. And so we followed all the best practices of marking the bonds green, but you also have some issuers who don't go through and follow those voluntary best practices. And, an investor could still in there, if they want to call it green, it's not tightly regulated at this point. But essentially that's the idea, right? So the bond funds will say this portfolio has green investments, and they each have a different way of showing their investors why and the benefits. And we did, spend a fair amount of time talking about the environmental benefits of the projects here, so investors could look at those metrics and understand them.
Any other questions about the bond issue? Well, congratulations to all. Very successful issue, first issue without any problems and a very beneficial rate. So, good. Moving right along to the most important topic today. Board approval of the budget. Mr. James, do you want to say a word?
Sure. As the cover memo to the budget document we have on the agenda indicates, we've had a number of meetings starting in mid-March to look at the draft. And I checked today, there are the 17 pages of questions and answers that have been posted on the website. So this budget got a thorough scrubbing. And that's the board's due diligence responsibility to do that. And the only change really is the change in debt service to reflect pretty close, not on the money, but it's pretty close to being on the money with the revised budget, I guess we got in April. So we had a public hearing. There was no open interest in the public hearing. I don't think we got any correspondence. I didn't get stopped at the grocery store and ask about it. So that comes to one measure sometimes. So how the community reacts to things. So staff's done a great job with the budget. Yeah, it's ready for final consideration.
I've got to ask, now, the 17 pages of questions and answers. Those are all your questions, right?
Very much.
That's exactly what the committee should be doing. That's great. That's great. So go ahead, make a motion, Mr. Jinks.
I recommend that make a motion that the board approve the AlexRenew fiscal year 25 operating and capital budget.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Caldarelli. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Madam Secretary, did we get a vote from Ms. Hammer? Oh, I said aye too.
Yes.
Good. Okay, let the record show that we approve the budget. Now, along with that comes the rates, rules, and regulations. Also, Mr. Jenks.
The budget puts in place increase bond sale doesn't come free. It adds to debt service plus prior debt service. Pay for AlexRenew and our increased costs of operations plus making sure our staff compensation stays competitive so that all that costs more money. And that means a rate increase, and that is reflected in these rules, rates, and regulations. And in addition, there is the only public speaker we had over the last year raised the question of the winter rates, winter methodology, and that board staff dug into that, and there is a revised method that is incorporated in these proposed rates, rules, and regulations.
I've got a comment. The description of the winter average on page 3 is beautifully written.
Really?
Easy to understand. So, kudos to
Thank
whoever
you.
wrote it.
That's great. We wrote that back in March. We went to read it the other day and we did not feel the same way. But that's good that
I read it and said, that you could almost fit it on a postcard. It's very clear.
maybe we're overthinking it.
It's complicated. It's complicated.
The only thing confusing is winter quarter average. It's like,
Just so you know, in your green folders, we put FAQs for the winter quarter average that will be updated and put on the website. So it's a page and a quarter of FAQs to go through the simple statement and the rates, rules, and regulations. That'll be on the website starting on July 1st when it goes into effect.
there's no discussion. Mr. Jenks will entertain a motion.
That we approve the revised rates, rules, and regulations presented to us tonight, so that we can set our rates in the process by which we bill and collect our revenues for the fiscal year 25.
Is there a second? Mr. Beal? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Good. Congratulations, everybody. issued bonds and passed a budget and passed rates. Let's move right on to compensation philosophy. Mr. Carl? Is that you?
Yes, so we presented to the board back in April, an overview of our compensation study that we completed this year. That was completed in line with the compensation philosophy that the board adopted back in December of 2010. We had mentioned to the board that we wanted to go back and take a fresh look at our compensation philosophy and that we circle back with the board in the coming meetings. And this evening, we're presenting a draft revision to the compensation philosophy for the board's consideration. The intent of the compensation philosophy remains the same. However, what we wanted to do, the primary reason for the revision to the philosophy was to build in the benefits piece of compensation. So when we read the compensation philosophy from the 2010 version, it was speaking with respect to pay. Today, it's speaking through the lens of total compensation, which includes our benefits as well. And we put together the compensation philosophy to modernize it to meet 4 key objectives: transparency, equity and fairness, external competitiveness, and then recognition. A lot of what was in the old policy got moved around and shuffled around. So its intent remains the same, but we do have review and approve this evening. But if the board wishes to have further time with the philosophy, there's no rush to have this approved this evening if you want to take more time to review it.
Let's open up the board to discussion. What's the mood of the board? Are we ready to vote on this? It's rather brief, and rather clear, actually. It's like we reduced the length of this thing by about 70%. I really do like when these policies become clearer. I see somebody's hand at work here.
This one's not me, actually.
Really?
Yes.
It's very clear and it
Would have been longer, right?
Yeah, that's right.
it's the mood of the board.
I'm ready to approve it.
Ready-
I had
ready to go?
one suggested change.
Wants to look at this if it's not a problem.
Put it on for next week, next month? Okay. It's cool. Okay.
I don't mean to delay you at all.
No, this policy should be carefully considered.
Yeah, and I circulated the revised policy base. We did receive some comments from the board, so that got revised and sent out yesterday. So the version in your green folder is the current version, not the version in board packet. And we highlighted the changes that were made. We wanted to, after receiving the questions, went back and looked at it again through the lens of total compensation, make sure it was clear that we're speaking total compensation throughout the entire philosophy.
Yeah. I like the fact that we state our objectives up front. Good. So let's move right on to the next policy, which is the authority of the CEO. Also another tight, well-written document. What's the mood of the board? Are we ready to vote on this today, or you want to put this on the agenda for next month?
I would like to hold
on this
hold
one?
it. I had some questions, Mr. Carl. He's responded to those. I think the task orders for annual budgets is still unclear.
Yeah.
It needs to be clarified.
Tighten up a little bit.
Needs to be tightened up, because I think in the response I got back from Mr. Carl about basically the professional services contracts, I think because of the title of the section, it says construction, and C, which is one of the annual budgets, doesn't say is under construction. This can infer that if we budget $62 million for something in the CIP in a single year, that could be awarded. And I don't think that's the intent.
No,
But I think it's clearly, this is intended so that people who will eventually be sitting in our chairs down the road can look at it and go, yeah, I understand what that is. That's what was meant. So I think that's the one piece in here that stuck out, and I think needs some additional work.
1 C and D. Yeah.
well, what we can do too, Ms. Fees and I kind of debated this, we try to cut this down and we put professional services and construction together. what we can easily do is just repeat the same statements under professional services and construction, and then that task order and annual budgets would not appear under the construction piece. I think so context, the reason that we're looking at revising this policy is one, that there was some information in here that didn't align with code. Code must have changed at some point. The policy didn't get updated regarding change orders. So we wanted to make sure that was clear. And Ms. Waters, every time we touch a policy, she wants to touch the whole thing. So we went through the entire policy and made revisions to make it clear for staff as well. I think the biggest challenge for staff, since we've been in our leadership positions here, is what goes to the board and what doesn't. We get those questions a lot from staff, and we wanted to make that very clear in the policy, what we'd like to bring to the board and what we've been practicing, and make it reflective in the policy. So any previous contract that the board has approved that's a multi-year contract, like AlexRenew, like the owner's advisor services, that's included in a line item in the budget annually in the capital cost of AlexRenew. We don't want to have to bring that contract back to the board every single year for approval for that annual budget for that specific contract. Any construction costs, new contracts for construction would be brought to the board for review and approval.
I think one thing would be helpful for the next meeting is to go back. We don't get that many contracts. Go back maybe the last 2 years and say what would have been, what no longer would come to us that did.
Yeah, it was those two, the EPC
And the owner advisor.
and the owner advisor, and that was a decision that was made by previous leadership at the time, given the spend on AlexRenew and taking over the program, that it would be brought to the board, even though the policy was sort of silent on it. Typically weren't bringing other contracts to the board for approval. They're just usually the AlexRenew expenditures related to professional services. But like the engineering BOAs, for example, we re-up those every single year, and there's task orders under those BOAs that we just, continually put out task orders. There's how many a month is Glapion? 10 to 15, 10 to 15 task orders a month going out to engineering BOAs to keep the IR&R work at the plant moving and the job work. So they've never been coming to the board. So we're trying to get that in there and make it clear. So there's task order piece, engineering BOA, and then there's these professional services contracts for multi-year projects. That would be AlexRenew, PPSU, and the solids program are the three big ones that we would have to bring to the board each year for the annual budget.
Yeah. No, I'm struggling with 1B. That could be interpreted a lot of different ways. I've got to spend some time with it. So let's put this on the docket for the July meeting or even later. Everybody needs time. The rest of it's very clear.
And that was just a term limitation so I can sign a contract to renew it for the next year within the term limit. That's the intent of B. So if there's a 6-year contract with 1-year renewals after the 6 years, that we don't need to bring the renewal to the board for approval.
One thing to think about in looking at this language might be to make it clear in the original board motion that approves a contract that in effect it's for an estimated total amount over X to Y period, just so there's something in the record that if somebody says, hey, 2 years ago we approved this and we haven't seen it again, the answer is if you go back and look at it, it says in the agenda item that describes it, what you're authorizing is in effect projected to be a multi-year contract totaling about X, that the CEO would automatically do annual renewals on within the amounts that are have been approved in the capital improvement project, something like that.
Just the other question we received, the intent would be to bring any service agreement or interjurisdictional agreement with one of our Fairfax County, Arlington County, City of Alexandria to the board for approval. That's what has been done in previous practice. That wasn't captured in the old delegation of authority. It just wasn't, it was again, silence. We're trying to make things a little clearer. We put non-monetary in here. There have been a few small you can get into technical discussion if it's monetary, not non-monetary agreements that we've been executing, one with Zell for extending the staging area. There's no money associated with it in the MOU. There will be when the agreement has to be moved forward. And then we've also been working, with the city on potentially setting up a parking area for Limerick Field in our Bartholomew lot outside. And that wouldn't have any monetary exchange either. So we tried to put a term in there. I don't know if it's the right term. Feedback on that would be helpful as well.
Yeah.
I know Mr. Jinks has already given us feedback.
Yeah, I've got to wrestle with 1 date because I've seen some contracts get extended, and before you know it, you've got a contractor who's been on board for 10, 20 years. And then I think there's a little more precision on contract term limitations, what that means. Maybe original contract term
Correct.
limitations.
Yeah.
But anyway, we'll do this again, bring this back up in July.
And I think it's been the revised version we got tonight took out, I raised the issue to Mr. Carl about leases. And leases are long-term. They're, I think it's pretty standard for governing bodies to get leases brought to them. And they're not things that are emergencies and are going to go away, like a construction easement. We don't need to see those, but something that's a lease for real property, that's going to be probably multi-year, and those should come to the board.
Okay. Right along. I think we're now ready to talk about the preliminary and primary system upgrades. Part of our business.
So last month, Kevin and I talked to you about our solids CMO project. We mentioned this one. So tonight we're going to talk to you, right, which is coming up for you. I'm going to give you some background. So if you remember that presentation, I talked about solids and wastewater treatment, and there being two types of solids. One, solids that are generated through the biological process, or biological treatment process, and solids that come in with both streams, so trash, grit, those types of things. So this project is really focused on the first part of treatment when water gets to our facility, how we prep it before it gets to that biological treatment stage. So we want to remove the trash and the grit. And these initial facilities are focused on doing that. So we're basically touching all of our treatment systems. And so this section of our process is located in the north and south plant. So Payne Street is here for orientation, and we've got the cemeteries to our north. So flow comes into the plant and kind of all comes together at building A. So just kind of walking through the flow process, comes in through A, is pumped over to K, and then goes through primary settling in these tanks here. So starting with building A, the main things that we're replacing are our existing core screens so that they're at the end of their useful life. But we also want to expand that facility to give us some additional reliability. So we've got 2 screening channels right now that can pass flow. But if we have a screen that's out of service, we can't get treatment all the time. So having a 3rd channel, adding that redundancy will allow us to be able to continuously treat even if we have a screen go down. So not only are we replacing the core screens, but we're also expanding that building to give us a little bit more redundancy. And as part of that project, we are looking at replacing our raw water pumps. So once the water comes into building A, it needs to be pumped over to building K for further treatment. So those pumps are also approaching the end of their useful life. So we'd like to replace those as well. And then we're doing some kind of housekeeping maintenance item on the building itself, looking at the wet wells and the conduits and making sure that there isn't concrete deterioration, those types of things, and then addressing it once we inspect it if we find it. And then moving over to building K, this is where our fine screens are and our grit systems are located. And so we want to replace our existing fine screening system and as well as our grit system. So we are replacing the existing grit system in addition to doing some upgrades that are going to get us better grit removal efficiency in that facility. And then finally moving over to primary settling, we've got a couple different things going on there. The first being our primary rear observation house, which is a structure that sits over the back end. And that process, as it goes over the weir, releases some gases that can be corrosive. So over time, that component of that building had become corroded. So it's really focused on refurbishing those components. For primary settling, we want to look at our scum collection system. So sometimes you get fats, oils, greases that float to the surface. You get hair, you get fine floatables that need to be removed from the process. So we're going to be making some improvements to our scum system as well. So a lot of different things going on under the umbrella of this project. And so just, you know, since I know you guys are so excited about water, I wanted to let you see what some of this equipment actually looks like. So starting on this side of the screen, you can see these are our existing core screens here. They're pretty big. For scale, we've got some dumpsters right behind them. Our raw sewage pumps for replacement. You can kind of see this wet floor sign. You can kind of see the scale of the pumps there. So we're talking about large pieces of equipment. And then for our grit systems, you can't really see those because they're inside of a tank, but they do have conveyor systems associated with them. So once the grit is collected, it's moved to our truck bay and it's trucked off site for disposal. So we're looking at also replacing parts of those systems as well. So this is what it looks like visually.
How old is some of the equipment we're looking at in that picture?
This is about 20, most of this stuff is over 20 plus years old. The pumps are probably a little bit longer, closer to 30. The pumps all went in at different times, so the age is not consistent across the board. But basically, most of this stuff went in with our last major upgrade. So, you know, turn of the
Century.
2000s, yeah. So, approaching 25 years plus on some of this equipment.
And when we look to the future, is it a one-to-one replacement or this could be completely rethought and re-engineered?
Well, we have an eye to the future to see what we need to do to remain resilient. We know that there's a request from the city potentially to increase the capacity of the plant. And so when we're doing these upgrades, we're making sure that there's some flexibility in the system with regards to certain things like flow and sustainability. So it depends on where we end up, but as you can see, we don't have very much space to expand on our existing site, so we're not expecting a significant increase in flow over the lifetime of this equipment. By the time we get to that point, we might be talking about, you know, some other technology or some other equipment. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Talking about space, that building.
This one here,
The
the burn
revised,
building?
the fire training facility, is that footprint going to increase when they?
It is not. They're going to stay within the confines of their property. So their property just happens to abut ours, and so they get access to that facility through our property, but they're not expanding onto our property.
Remind the board for future reference that it's somewhere in the files there is a discussion, a general understanding that if the AlexRenew ever needed to expand, it didn't have any place to go, that building behind, which is the old city incinerator, now used for lots of other things, was fair game to be considered to be vacated by the city and that land added to the AlexRenew.
The building with the blue walls or the brick building?
The
behind
brick
it?
building behind it.
That's a pretty good sized footprint.
This is the building.
It is, yeah.
This I think is the city archive building, isn't it?
Archives are in
And
there.
then here's the,
Historic Alexandria has literally an attic that has all sorts of interesting stuff. And the food pantry Alive has a big room in there for storage, and I'm not sure what else has been put in there, but it is back when we were, maybe the last time we were talking about upgrades, I know I had a conversation here in College, and somewhere it's in writing. It was not a legal agreement, but it was understanding that that push came to shove, that this building was fair game. If there was absolutely no other way to deal with whatever either we were legally required to do or capacity wise had to do, and the city would consider vacating that property.
I go to Alive every week. It's in that building?
There is an Alive building on the ground floor by the loading dock.
It's the
Across from the substation.
It's basically used for
Yeah.
storage, just high shelves.
Oh, no, I just didn't realize that is the back of that building. Because I only see it from the Payne Street side.
So is the burn building the blue building in the slide?
Yeah, looks blue.
Okay.
So we've already started discussions with the city's team about their project, and we've been coordinating site access and site use, and we formalized that into an agreement. So that's one thing. So basically the slide summarizes things that we need to consider as the project proceeds into construction. One of the main ones being, coordination with the city, because they're going to be redoing their burn building here in the next year or so. As well as maintaining flow through the plant. Obviously, we have to continue to receive flow and push it through our treatment process. We've got several other projects going on.
I was going to ask that. How are you? I know you're planning to do this, but how are you maintaining flow while you're rebuilding this?
So right now,
Pieces or
sorry.
doing it in pieces?
Yes, so the phasing of this is going to be critical. Right now, we're looking at some form of bypass pumping. The team is currently considering, are there ways for us to get around bypass pumping? And so I think, once we select a contractor and partner with them, with the design engineer, we'll finalize what that will actually look like. There's a rough plan, but I think that's going to change as we progress through design. Justin, did you want to add anything to that?
This is the headworks of our plant. So, we got to process 116 MGD during wet weather. We're doing all we can do to avoid bypass pumping. RiverNew tunnel will be in service at this point. We're going to be able to leverage that as storage off peak. And then we're also going to be able to come up with slick ways of making sure that we let flow go through by gravity and keep areas dry for people to work. It's living through Hoof's Run Interceptor and the 35 MGD bypass pump station that was redundant at 70 MGD. Not planting, we have space or the capability to manage here at AlexRenew. So that's sort of gravity first approach. And if you need a bypass pump, we'll bypass pump.
Yes, the details, finite details will remain to be worked out as part of the final design. We're only in the first stages of design here, schematic design.
That's why you pay consultants.
Yeah. But we've got a pretty smart team here too, so I want to give our team some credit as well. We've all got, a lot of us have strong engineering backgrounds, but yes, we would want contractor input and design engineer to help with that.
The other thing I should point out, since I mentioned that building's land, Payne Street doesn't need to be as wide as it is. And there is the old animal shelter across the street from Payne Street. That is, I forget what use, non-mission critical use the city has in that building, but that is another opportunity. Unfortunately, there's a lot of other land across the street, but it has power lines above it. And as we've learned, Dominion doesn't want anything underneath their power lines, even if you say you move it. And the chances of them ever needing it are minimal.
Crane storage, building height. We tried it for RiverNew.
All sorts.
Yes.
But there are, so
Yeah.
besides this building, there is other land to the east that is potentially we could expand to. Not much, but every little bit might help at some point down there.
And eventually.
City staff
You
is not
guys
happy when
work
I
your
said
magic to help us get that if we need it.
AlexRenew could use this. But
Oh,
like, yeah, if you do what needs to be done and what's in those buildings doesn't need to be on that particular street. And eventually, I mean, that building is not in good shape.
No, it's not.
And it's therefore at some point, the city's gonna have to spend money
I-
fixing it, and it's not, it's completely inefficient the way it's laid out. Literally, the incinerator pit where you would have dumped all the refuse is repurposed into a room.
But that sounds really interesting.
Mr. Jenks, I don't want to sidetrack the discussion, but I think your point is a very good one. We are landlocked, and we need to keep in mind places that we can acquire more property when we need to.
Yep, and those are three opportunities for us at some point, particularly if we get to having to expand capacity or a new regulation that requires us to build a new building.
Interesting.
So as you guys know, we've got lots of other construction going on, so we'll need to coordinate not only with the burn building, but with other, the solids projects, and RiverRenew will be wrapping up as well. So maintenance of plant operations, and with the expansion of building A, going through the city's DSUP process since we were affecting the look and feel of the plant. So we're trying to get out ahead of that early. We've already had some initial discussions with their permitting folks to see what is required. And then our engineers are already kind of aware of some of those requirements and are kind of working them into the design. So next slide, one. All right, so what is all this going to cost? So this is a snapshot of our 10-year CIP. So at the end of the day, we're looking at, 84.5 million over the life of the project. We're showing fiscal year 23 here because we actually started some of the work on this project back in 23. The estimate here, is kind of based on the preliminary information, preliminary design, and will get refined as we move through design. Same with solids. Here, this look familiar from the budget.
It does. Yeah.
Those are millions, not dollars.
Did I say dollars?
No, it's just,
Millions.
it looks like dollars on the slide.
Oh, yeah, no, that's millions, millions. I don't think we can do anything for $85. And so what does the schedule look like overall? So the first half of this year, similar to solids, we've been really focused on getting through the procurement. CMAR contractor and the engineer has been working on preliminary design. With approval of the CMAR contractor, hopefully we can get that from you guys next month. We would like to move into, final design and start pre-construction services with the selected contractor. For this design, we're expecting to see probably 3 design packages based on what we know right now and based on some initial feedback. So package 1, which we're calling the GMP, which is the guaranteed maximum price for that group of work, is going to include the pipe gallery, the primary settling tanks, and the rear observation house. So we want to kind of hit those first because they're on the western half of our area away from the burn building. So we're trying to minimize conflict there. Plus some of this work can proceed independently of bypass pumping and some of the other things in the permitting that we're trying to work out with the other packages. And then our second package would be focused on building A, which is where force screens are. And then moving into package 3, which is building K. So that's what we're anticipating right now. And that's kind of the projected timeline shown on this slide right now. And then once we get through all that, we expect construction to start in early 2026. And then continue for about 5 years or so.
This is calendar year that this is on. It's not fiscal year, correct?
This is calendar year. So similar to what we did for solids, we had a 2-step process for CMAR selection. We started with an RFQ that happened in the fall of last year. From that process, we shortlisted, 3 teams. We had 5 people apply, and we shortlisted 3. These names will look familiar. It's the same 3 teams that proposed on solids. Those that qualified were invited to submit a proposal. So in the spring of this year, we released the RFP. We've had proprietary meetings with the 3 shortlisted firms to talk about technical requirements and answer any questions on that, and any question on the contract agreement that we put out there. And then last month, we received the proposals and started the review. This month, we've kind of finalized that review evaluation process. We've conducted interviews with the respondents, and we want to move into making a formal recommendation of a selected person from those 3 companies. So that will be coming to you guys next month for approval. And then assuming board approval is successful next month, we would move immediately into award and then notice to proceed in July as well. So this is the overall schedule right now. So similar to solids, we felt like there was a lot of benefits to going through the CMAR process. We're able to accelerate the schedule compared to a traditional design to build project. We're able to consider the overall value of the people proposing on this outside of just like the lowest price. We get to maintain a direct relationship with the designer of the project instead of, other methods would run that relationship through the contractors. We have them and then they would pick a designer. So this way we can maintain that relationship. We also get the benefit of contractor input during the design process, similar to what we're doing on solids. We're also using the open book cost estimating. So remember, we get to see all their backup on all the detail on how they put their pricing together. And then there's just a step markup on that. And then we have a pretty good idea of what the cost is going to be before construction starts. And then finally, we can break the stuff into packages. So like our GMPs. So some stuff can go early. They can start work on that early while design proceeds on other areas of the plan. So these are all benefits of having the CMAR contracting mechanism in place. So similar.
Before you move off that slide, by the way, very good presentation. The second to the last bullet, high degree of cost certainty prior to design completion. In your mind, what is giving you a high degree of cost certainty?
So the contractor is involved in giving input throughout this process as the engineer is creating the design. And then they're putting together their cost information, and we're able to actually see the methods and where their cost information came from. So when you have a traditional design bid build project, the engineer puts together a cost, right? You go out to bid, you have no idea what the bids are going to be. And then if they're different from the engineer's estimate, you're trying to figure out why the contractor's estimate is different from the engineer's estimate. So with this open book pricing, we have a better idea. We can actually see how the contractor's pricing it. And it's a set markup on the actual cost to construct the job.
Also at 90, that's at 90%.
Design.
We're getting that at 90% design.
So the next few weeks, you'll get 3 proposals in.
We've already got the proposals in.
You've already got them in.
We've got them in. We've conducted the interviews, and we've kind of made a preliminary selection, which we're vetting through our process before we send to you guys for approval.
And if you can tell me, were the costs close to your?
Oh, so what we got here is just their contractor markup, not a cost for the project. We won't get a cost for the project until we get further along in design. So what Justin was saying is like, once we get to 90%, we'll get the contractor's cost on the design at 90%. The only cost information right now we have is what the contractor's fee is going to be on top of the cost to do the work.
Got it.
It's the opposite of the tunnel. If you think about the tunnel, we had a 30% design when we went out to RFP. We got a lump sum at 30%. Here, we're getting just a fee. Common practice is to get a fee, their markup. And then you get your costs at the 30, 60, 90, 100%, and 100%, right? You've costed out with an open book model in CMAR. So we'll have pricing updates as soon as 30%, 60%, and then we'll establish a GMP at 90%. That's the guaranteed maximum price for the job. That's your certainty. Which the idea in this model is it reduces the amount of change orders you get over design bid build model, because you don't know what money is getting hidden in the low bid. You get change orders down the road to get the price up to whatever they need to do to make a margin. Here, you see the margin and you know what the project costs.
They can't, in effect, hide money.
Less
Or
gamesmanship.
they can't lowball something intended to change order you later.
Correct.
And we won't know the GMPs until.
Every design phase.
For each package,
Please,
right?
could you go
Can
back?
we go back to the.
Yeah,
overall
no, I've
schedule?
got it here. We're good. Okay, so we won't know that till 25 sometime.
So, I mean, this is one we're expecting them to hit the different packages, but obviously to get to package 1, there'll be preliminary submittals before that, 30, 60, 90 that Justin referred to.
And if we and the contractor at any of those package stages can't agree, we can just take the off ramp and off it to get it done another way.
And there's also different ways to try to control costs as well. Like the contractor can give us a price to self-perform some work, but if we don't come to agreement on price, we might want to look for other alternatives to that, just to kind of a check of their number to make sure that it's accurate. So there's different ways that we can make sure that we're getting the best prices. All right, so similar to Sol's, just kind of a refresher on the criteria. So when we were in the RFQ stage, we considered several things as summarized here. So looking at team organization and commitment, related project experience, their assessment of project risks and how they were going to mitigate those risks, and then their safety program and record. And points were divided between those options till we got to 100, and that's how we scored the initial selection. So from that process of 5, we shortlisted 3. Those 3 moved into the proposal phase, where our criteria was a little bit different. So we had project team qualifications, their approach to the project and how they were going to execute the work and how they were going to manage it, and then as well as their fee, their markup on the actual work. And so those points all total to 100 as well. So the highest scoring team based on these conditions is going to be who is recommended for approval to you guys next month.
Without asking any numbers, in general in this process, the contractor's fees are pretty kind of markets. They're within a narrow range of market standards so that you don't end up with somebody proposing 5% and somebody proposing 12. Things are much closer than that.
We saw a range, but yeah, we didn't have any, I don't know if can I say like what the percentages
I
were?
guess, we've seen ranges between, not this specific job, but we've seen ranges on jobs like this between 3 and 15. Now, 3 isn't self-performing any work, therefore, they're not going to have a large overhead, but typically you see anywhere from 5 to 9.
And I would say, the market is changing as well because there was a change in the law, right? Whereas the contractors before were limited on how much work they could self-perform. That changed last year. Is that last year that it changed? And so, we'll see how the markups change to reflect that. Some contractors may choose to perform more work, so you're going to see some variations in the numbers based on what they think are going to self-perform versus have somebody else do.
And the theory being if they're self-performing and charge a higher percentage, if they hadn't self-performed, your subcontractor would be charging you those expenses. So it's just a matter of where those expenses show up, right?
So one of the things we had to do in this job, learning from other jobs in the industry, is we said only contractors that self-perform work could be shortlisted. If it was a contractor that did not self-perform, we knew that fee would be low. We didn't want that to throw the job, so they were precluded from getting past the qual stage. It was a pass-fail. We've seen that happen on other jobs in that range of 3 to 15. You can see how it can throw a job at 10 points if you're close on technical. And then you're going to get bid can be higher. Your end fee is going to be higher because they're going to just pass on the subs fee to the owner and put their 3% on top of it. So we've avoided that in this situation. So our average, I think, that we've seen over the last couple of jobs is around 7, 8.
Right.
Thank you.
All right, so next ups, I've already kind of touched on some of these, but a lot of stuff happening in July, assuming board approval on the 16th. So we'd immediately move to award on the 17th, issue notice to proceed about a week later, and then 30% design is also expected to be complete at the end of July and issued to the contractor. So a lot of activities in July scheduled. That's all I've got. I know you guys asked questions throughout, but are there additional questions about this?
Sure.
The last slide, if you could go back to that. You're going to award on the 17th, and 2 weeks later, they're going to issue a 30% design document.
They're working on we have an engineer under contract right now that's
Okay.
working on the design.
Fine. Thank you.
Now, the projected costs on slide 5, you don't have to go back to it. It adds up to 84.5 million. Like all the work we do, there's a range to that, right? It could be 30% higher or 10% lower.
Yeah, I think if you look at the bottom of the slide, there's a range on class 5 estimates that talks about the typical variability.
Okay, minus 50 to plus 100. Yeah, I didn't read that. I see it now.
I think we're a little bit better than that here, but we just wanted to give you some context when we talk about a class 5 estimate. With a design like this, some things are going to be more defined than others. So this is the more conservative take on it.
And those are 2024 dollars.
No, I believe we've escalated for out
Escalated.
years.
Yeah,
Caitlin,
okay.
that was the approach we took in the budget.
Escalated construction midpoint.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we use the heavy escalation in the beginning phase, which is 7.5%.
7 or 8, and then we dropped based on.
So any way you look at it, this is a very big project. Many.
It's not as big as AlexRenew, but it's a significant effort to.
It's in the family.
Yep.
It's in the family. Yeah. Good. Okay, something to look forward to. Thank you very much. Any more questions? Very good, thank you. Moving right along. Monthly outcomes.
Just a couple highlights if the board doesn't have any questions or comments. Jumping to page 3. Going back to our lease discussion earlier, the lease agreement for the 5th floor is coordinating with the city, is going to city council on June 25th, the legislative meeting. The city got that in just before break in July and August for council. I will circulate a copy, given tonight's discussion, I will circulate a copy of the lease agreement to the board following this meeting. If we want to take official action on it, the next meeting, we can.
Got to say, it was a very busy month for community engagement. The number of groups that were in this building. It looks like every day there must have been something going on.
Yes. It's quite busy.
And for the board members who haven't visited the voting stations downstairs, that's very impressive.
Each voter counts as a visitor.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we should count them. No, I think that's exactly why this building was created the way it was. So I just have one question for regarding finances. I missed the old table 2.3 A and B. The cash reserves and debt service coverage. That was always my favorite part of the month. I used to look forward to that. I did.
We can put it back. We thought since we included it in the budget, it wasn't necessary in the board in the monthly report. But we can certainly easily add that back in.
Because that's really our compliance with board policy. And you're right, we could go a month without it, but it's very important.
We'll put it in.
We are ahead of target. If just to,
We always are,
yes, sir.
but I just want to make sure we always
Got
are.
it.
Is it in the record?
Yeah, got it. Just note on, Mr. Robertson noted that we've had an increase in our active payment plans. The number in the board report is 243. That has since jumped to 295. So we went from 243 since May to 295 today. 90 at the beginning of the year. So the word is getting out, at least on, people are reading our bill stuffers and communications and signing up for payment plans. It's a good sign of our delinquencies have, for the second month in a row, I think we've hit a plateau with our delinquencies.
Any particular, we have commercial delinquencies and residential delinquencies, any sense of just a proportional mix of both signing up for payment plans or businesses saying, oh, I better do this because I don't want to get shut off?
295 are residential, 26 are commercial. And we are working on breaking up the multifamily from the commercial. Given the previous board comments, we should have a draft of that by the next meeting to show you all, to show you how many of those commercial accounts are actually multifamily.
Any questions on the monthly report?
I mean, a couple of points. I'm sure staff already considers this, but with a non-ratepayer revenue generation by leasing joint use facilities and such, I would think that Fairfax would receive some of that because of the joint use facility nature of it. Since it was the capital expenditure for that facility was paid partially by Fairfax. Is that your understanding as well?
So when we looked at that when we did the 5th floor, the way that the there was a separate cost share agreement for the environmental center. We can kind of send you a summary email of what the takeaway was, but
I think the percentages varied, right?
there were certain areas that were excluded because of the building that were excluded. So there's a shared area for certain portions of the building between Fairfax and AlexRenew, and then floors that were excluded because it was sole use of the organization. So they were at 100% AlexRenew.
Oh, okay.
It's literally broken up into distinct areas. So we'll dig that up and send you.
Okay, as long as, it's accounted for. That's, as I said, they would already cover it. The other thing in the earlier presentation with respect to any projects that if you're considering accommodations for cities' future needs and flow capacity needs, that would also have to be paid by city separately or.
Yeah, agreed. So there's two options there's been a long-term plan for 54 to 58 MGD. There's two options. There's a technical option, which is like a fuzzy filter in your BRBs to get the additional 4 MGD capacity. And then there's an option of where Fairfax could sell 4 MGD capacity to the city. Those are the options. But if the 4 MGD expansion is if we do a 4 MGD technical expansion, that is, fully funded by Alex only.
I think we may be getting into a little bit of a detail, but if that expansion requires the use of facilities that are already paid for, joint use, so there has to be some reimbursement to the county as well.
Correct. Agreed.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Good point.
Moving on to the River Renew dashboard. Any comments? Mr. Carl, any observations?
Just page 2, Pendleton Street. We have 40 more miles to drive. I'm going to start next month. We're driving right at the intersection of Union and Pendleton, so right where the outfall is currently, to finish the foundation piles for the structure. It's going to take about 4 weeks. So we are going to be doing an outreach campaign. We have our SAG meeting this week. Well, you'll see some emails that we, send out to notify the community. I think that in addition to that, on page 6, our SIP and C participation has dwindled to the point of people just come out to have a conversation. We're not getting a lot of traction at our SIP and Cs. So we're proposing on July 1 for Hoofs Run and Royal Street we're going to run this by the stakeholder advisory group this week as well, to cease the SIP and Cs at those locations and then keep the Pendleton Street SIP and C open until we're done driving piles. And that would likely be sometime in early August.
Yeah.
Board has any thoughts on that, but we haven't seen a lot of staff effort to get out there. And we're not getting the turnout that we were at one point in the job. We're over the hump, I think.
I don't have any concern. Question talking about pile driving. Have we had any claims for vibration damage? Good. Next question is how many were found in your process, but we haven't had any claims.
No, it's been
good.
It's been good.
And the SAG meeting will be here on the 20th, right?
Yeah.
The board members' comments. Plan on the Thursday night?
With the SAG meeting this week, we're going to be spending some time with SAG to review the wayfinding signage and reflection road concepts for African American Heritage Park. Those signs are complete the collaboration for the city. So we're going to walk through those signs with the SAG so we can see the final versions before they're installed.
Any comments on the dashboard? River Renew is going so smooth, it just runs itself. I'm I know that's not true, but it's so smooth. Very different than when we started. We pour over this stuff.
A lot of it's out of our control.
We're in the later innings of the game. The lead is firmly established. No, this is an incredible accomplishment. Incredible accomplishment. Any other topics? Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thanks. Thanks, everybody.